In the previous video, I discussed psychological theories of learning in general. Now I will talk about many aspects of learning, such as what makes it possible or impossible, what facilitates learning, some things relevant to the process of learning, and how learning can be assessed. I will leave studying intentional learning for the third and final video in this mini-series. My name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel TFF, Teacher from Finland. Don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. Let's begin with your starting point. Biologically, learning is about the neural networks in your brain changing. This is what is meant by the brain's plasticity. Any somewhat permanent change in behavior or retaining of any new information can be considered learning. The connections between the neurons in your brain change, making it possible for you to retain knowledge and skills, and the strength of those connections change due to all experiences. This means that learning things causes physical changes in your brain. Learning bad ways of doing things or memorizing false information is difficult to correct because the neural connections have already been formed. That is why it takes so much time to unlearn a bad technique, say, in order to learn the right way to do it. It makes sense to try and learn it right on the first try. The hippocampus is very important for learning because it functions as a storage between different parts of the brain. Learned knowledge is in the long-term memory, stored in those connections of neurons. But forming those connections requires the functioning of the hippocampus. Learning makes it possible for us to associate things with each other, such as the name of a YouTube channel with the face of a person on that channel. This is called associative learning. Non-associative learning refers to a permanent change in the intensity of the reaction. For example, habituation means getting so used to some signal, such as the noise of traffic, that one no longer reacts to it. The opposite is sensitization, causing one to become highly sensitive to a signal. For example, a leaking faucet in a hotel room might keep you awake at night, as you cannot block the sound of dripping water from your consciousness. This is, I think, due to the chaotic, unpredictable nature of the dripping. A more uniform sound, like the white noise of static, if you're old enough to know what that means, would be easier to ignore and be habituated to. There are many neurological causes of learning disorders. Cerebral palsy may be obvious, but even epilepsy may cause difficulties in learning. More commonly, problems with language production and or comprehension, as well as with attention or focusing, are typical neurological problems. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and attention deficit disorder, ADD, are the most common types of such disorders. These can be treated with rehabilitating therapy and medication. There are also temporary neurological factors that can influence learning. For example, the use of caffeine or sedatives can make it difficult. Caffeine can help you stay up all night studying, but you might benefit more from a good night's sleep, especially after you've studied during the day, as it is during the night afterwards that those connections in your brain form, causing lasting memories. Caffeine may interfere with that. Also, if you are simply tired, you will find it very difficult to learn new things or do anything cognitively demanding. Sleep is required for the formation of long-term memories. Again, rest is important before and after studying. Stress can reduce your ability to learn. The so-called stress hormone, cortisol, seems to decrease memory performance. Trying to avoid unnecessary stress would seem like a good idea, especially when you are trying to learn new things. Relieving stress with the use of mindfulness exercises might also work. Your motivation is affected by how badly you need to learn the new thing. That matters a lot for your likelihood of learning it, of course. If you realize that there is a strong need to learn it, you will be highly motivated and thus able to make the effort required. The actual content of the thing being learned matters as well. You may have an internal motivation to learn about the thing, but also the technical difficulty level might make it easy or difficult to learn. That difficulty level is of course relative to the learner. Besides the technical difficulty affecting how easily the thing is learned, motivation may also be affected, as a daunting task might feel too much to take on. A challenge of the right difficulty level is important, as we shall see in a bit. Your relevant earlier knowledge and skills influence how easily you learn new things. This is called transfer. The schemas in your mind may help you if they support the new things you are trying to learn. You can then place the new thing in its proper context and see how other things are connected to it. This makes it easy for you to incorporate the new with the old knowledge. But the schemas might also hinder your learning if there are contradictions between the old and the new. The new information can seem confusing. You may have to unlearn something, or you may require more contextual information to understand how the old and the new are connected. I will return to this point when discussing the process of learning. Some things are necessary to enable the student to learn. To some extent, I have already discussed them. These include things like their emotions, attitudes, and general atmosphere. Besides these, there is one important concept that can be used by others, especially teachers, to also improve learning. This is called the Zone of Proximal Development, ZPD. ZPD is a concept developed by Lev Vygotsky. The idea is very intuitive. The level of requirement for the learner should be just enough above the learner's current level, that they can reach it with the help of their teacher or peers. This means the learner is able to increase their level of expertise for the task with the help of the scaffolding provided by the teacher or others, and once that happens, they will be able to learn to function at that level. In Aristotelian terms, the scaffolding enables the learner to reach beyond their actual level toward their highest potential. It is important to not reach too high or to require too much of the learner, as that will frustrate them and reduce their motivation. Especially children require a lot of help with their emotional development and emotion regulation, and the parents need to help with that by providing a positive and safe atmosphere where the child will not be left alone with their emotions. The adults can help with conceptualizing the emotions, offering useful words to describe the emotions, for example. The concepts of learning and knowledge may differ from case to case. Pieces of trivia can be some kind of knowledge, but they significantly differ from broad complexes of information. Both kinds of knowledge can be learned, but the chosen goal based on what kind of knowledge is sought at present will lead to different methods of studying or practicing. Two basic types of strategies can be chosen from. One strategy is to repeat the information, whether it is by reading the same information from the same or different sources, or by underlining or by writing synopses. and reading them. The other is a strategy of constructing information oneself by expressing it in one's own words, even just by creating mind maps. An important concept regarding learning is metacognition, meaning the knowledge of what is known and how well it is known. A learner with good metacognition is aware of what they are trying to learn, what they already have learned, what remains to be learned, and even what their weak and strong points in the process are. Typically, it takes a high level of learning to be aware of such things, as someone new to the subject is unlikely to have any idea of how much there is to be learned. Developing metacognition in general takes time and practice, so children and even students at senior high school level tend to have poor metacognitive skills. I have already mentioned the concept of transfer briefly. It is about the transfer of information between separate instances of learning. You have to study several different subjects at school, for example, so there can be a transfer between those subjects. Whenever you are studying something, what you have learned previously can also influence the current process of learning. Often the information you have learned helps you learn new things more easily. This is called positive proactive transfer. For example, if you have studied world history, learning about the history of your own country, or vice versa, can become easier, as the same events will be discussed in both. It is also possible that the previous information makes it more difficult to learn the new information you are trying to learn. This is called negative proactive transfer. For example, if you are trying to learn Estonian after learning Finnish, you may find that some words are very similar in the two languages, but have completely different meanings. This might be confusing, and it could make it more difficult to memorize the Estonian meaning of the word. The effect can also be backwards in time, in a sense. A positive retroactive transfer means that as you learn new things, such as the psychological concept of schema, it can remind you of older knowledge, like the philosophical concept of schema. Unfortunately, new information can also make it more difficult to remember what you have learned in the past due to negative retroactive transfer. Perhaps you need several passwords, and having to learn a new one for a specific system can interfere with recalling an old password you still need for another system, especially if you pick similar passwords. Transfer can be bidirectional as well. For example, learning mathematics and physics tend to support each other. Similar languages can be difficult to learn and keep separate within your mind. It makes sense that you would want to benefit from positive transfer while avoiding negative transfer. One thing to remember then is to avoid trying to learn similar languages or other similar things at the same time. If you have to study similar things, take significant breaks between them at least. Skills requiring athleticism and bodily control tend to support each other, but for example, different martial arts have slightly different ways of doing some things, and trying to learn them at the same time might cause unnecessary difficulties. One important part of learning is the assessment of what you have learned so far. It is a metacognitive skill. Benjamin Bloom devised a classification of epistemic levels of learning that is now known as Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives in 1956, but it has been developed further since. The original taxonomy has 6 levels for knowledge-based objectives as follows. 1. Knowledge. The ability to recognize and recall the information as it was presented. 2. Comprehension. the ability to understand and interpret information. 3. Application, the ability to use the information appropriately, for example, to solve new problems. 4. Analysis, the ability to distinguish the parts forming the whole and to understand how the parts are connected to each other. 5. Synthesis, the ability to create something new, to combine available information in new ways. 6. Evaluation, the ability to assess learned information on the basis of relevant criteria. For example, making ethical evaluations of actions, judging the quality of craftsmanship, or the value of an innovation. This taxonomy can also be used by teachers to assess the students, or for example to present the goals for a given course to the students. You can also use it to assess your own level of knowledge. The idea of the taxonomy, as I see it, is to clarify the different levels one might be at in a given skill or branch of knowledge. The hierarchy of the above cognitive levels was altered in a 2001 publication, but the general idea of advancing from merely repeating information to doing more useful things with it remains. There are different taxonomies for affective and psychomotor skills as well. This video has become long enough as it is, so I will stop here. In the next and last part of this mini-series, I will discuss studying, intentional learning, and advice for studying. I hope to see you back here then. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe, and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.